Good afternoon, Senate Institutions. It's Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. We are going to work with Forest Parks and Recreation on a land transfer resolution. Usually these will start out in our House counterparts, but they've asked us to take it up and get it started down the path. And because they're working on some other things, and so we were glad to do that. So we're going to go through the bill. We're going to go through all what's going on and learn all about it. And hopefully when it's all said and done, we can take a vote on it. So who do we have before us today?
Wonderful. Thank you. For the record, I'm Rebecca Washburn. I'm the Director of Lands Administration and Recreation with the Forest Parks and Rec Department. Thanks so much for having me here today, and exciting to see a new chair, a new person to work with. And I understand there are some new members to the committee as well.
Yes, Senator Mazza.
Yes, right. Very new to the committee.
I'll explain the chair later.
I understand there might even be a newer chair after today. We also have Senator Renner's not feeling well, so she's on the screen, and so she's with us today as well.
Terrific.
And Wendy Harrison.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm Nancy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Hello, great to meet you all, and to see familiar faces as well.
Yeah.
I thought because there were some new committee members, it might be worthwhile to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about why we're here.
Very much.
Terrific. And I also just want to point out, I have Gannon Osborne here. He is our Land Conservation Program Manager and available to speak to any specific questions you might have about the projects, as he's the primary lead for those.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Is there a handout? Because I don't have a handout.
Okay. No, right here. No, right here.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. You have one under your agenda?
It's not. I'm sorry.
I didn't take it.
Okay, I know you didn't.
I just wanna help it through.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I thought maybe just as a quick way of giving some background and helping provide a little bit of context, it would be helpful to understand Forest Parks and Recreation, as part of the Agency of Natural Resources, has authority to own interests in land. We can own lands outright, like state forests and state parks that you might have in your communities, or conservation easements through programs where we acquire interest in private lands. And we have about 360,000 acres across the agency ownership in the form of state forests, state parks, wildlife management areas, boat launches, all the like. And then a number of other acres, about 140,000 in conservation easements. It is a lot. It's
360,000.
360,000 of lands, like Coolidge State Forest, Jamaica State Park, those places that we really love. And in part of that same statute, so the Conservation and Development Statute has a chapter that's specific to the authorities of the Forest Parks and Recreation Department. And our authority to acquire land comes in the first section, and it lays out the approval process involving the governor. We elect to also involve municipalities in helping get support for acquisitions before they take place. But there's another provision within that same chapter that calls on the General Assembly to approve the authority for the commissioner to be able to convey interest in land. And what that really looks like could be a land swap in the case of the two projects that I'll be sharing more details on in a few minutes, boundary line adjustments, our ski area leases when it comes time to amend leases with our ski areas. Those are the kind of things that would come before this committee. So a range of different types of projects for which we seek General Assembly approval based on this chapter in the.
Yes, these ski areas, how many years, I should know this, we talked about for renewals.
Yes.
20 years?
I think I was looking at this recently. There are intervals that they have the right to automatically renew up until a certain point.
Is there an escalation in pricing or leasing? Is there?
There were at the beginning, the first couple of 10-year intervals, there was an escalation in pricing, but we've plateaued on that, and now we have a level set of rates that we apply each year.
So there's no CPI tied to it or anything?
Not currently. I should always know to be prepared to talk about ski leases. when I
Well, we'll get you off the topic, I promise.
Yeah, we always do.
Great.
so.
Great.
Yeah, we'll have a wide range of discussion.
I welcome it.
Yeah, you will. Yeah.
So I wonder, are there other questions related to this chapter and the authority and the decision that Senator Ingalls will be sort of leading you through? I can provide you with a little bit of an explanation of sort of how we go about bringing these projects to
Please do.
fruition.
I'd really like you to go and spend as much time as you are willing to spend, because we'll, it is a new committee.
Yeah.
We have done this before, Senator Mazza and myself,
Mhm.
but I really want the committee to understand what we're doing here.
Terrific. So under this chapter, because it does give the General Assembly the approval to, or the authority to approve the commissioner being able to convey these interests, the idea is that we would only do this under really rare circumstances. When land comes into our responsibility, it comes based on, there's conservation values associated with it that benefit the public. There's a reason for us to have acquired that in the first place. So to give away all or part of the interest in that land should be a thoughtful process. And we see this chapter, or this section of the chapter, as really being a useful backstop on behalf of the public when it comes to owning land for particular interests. So what we end up doing is we might have projects that conceptualize internally. There's something that comes about internally that says, boy, this is a situation that could be resolved if we conveyed this interest, or if we pursued this particular project. Other times, and really often, more often is the cases where we're contacted by members of the public that say, I need a right of way across your land. I need to put in a septic system. Alberg a handful of years ago, they wanted to expand the cemetery and they were looking for lands of the state. So there are a lot of different scenarios that might come to us. And again, we have a pretty thorough process of an interdisciplinary team that's looking at all the conservation values present on the property that we might be giving away, as well as what are we gaining from this transaction. And at the end of the day, what we want to see is a net public benefit. We want a transaction to be worth it enough that the public is going to benefit from this. And it's not just necessarily an even trade. It's, hopefully we're getting something better out of this because we're taking time and energy out of our day to make sure that this project is done to the standard of excellence that we expect from anything that's permanent, like land protection.
I think we did one last year, I know we did one last year, but I think we did one last year where we ended up connecting a trail together. We just kind of swapped some land around so that they were able to, they got some land back, and we got the land that we wanted to connect the trail. And so we had an unconnected trail, but everybody owned land around it. And so they just kind of did a little lot line adjustment to connect the trail, give them back some land, and it was a benefit of all of us when it was all said and done. So.
And even in situations where I think another one that you saw last year was up in the Northeast Kingdom, Belvedere Bog.
Yep.
There was a neighboring landowner, a couple of landowners that we all agreed we didn't really know where the boundary was, but if we all agreed to it, we could record deeds that basically described through survey and legal descriptions of the parcels what those lands actually were. So in that case, we weren't gaining or losing any land, but we were creating clarity. And because we were exchanging deeds, that's considered conveying an interest, and we brought it before this committee for review. So that's another example where maybe less significant from a conservation value standpoint, but really a strong benefit because now we have a survey that clearly delineates the boundary of that section of Long Trail State Forest. And as you ask our surveyors, it's a very long section of Long Trail State Forest. It was a long line through wetlands. So let's see. We go through a process of evaluating a proposal, whether it's something that's been conceived of internally based on our state land staff's interest in management or further protections of conservation values that they know would be present in a particular situation. Do that review process, really try and evaluate it based on what's the net benefit that the public will achieve from taking the time to carry out this transaction. And I think really at the end of the day, the guiding principle is that this should only happen in very rare circumstances and only in situations where it's obvious even to the layperson that the public is benefiting from what's happening here.
Do you ever get in a situation where somebody wants to convey a piece of land to you and you just say, no, it doesn't have the benefit to us?
We try to be very strategic. You know, we know we shouldn't own all of the land in the state. There's a reason why private landowners own land and manage it for their own purposes. I think we see plenty of situations where there are conservation values that say, oh, that would be really logical for public ownership. Adding Alberg Dunes, there was a recent addition to the state park owing to a parcel that came available to us. And we decided, you know, that really makes a lot of sense. But there are other landowners that reach out to us, some on an annual basis, asking us to consider acquiring their land. And for a variety of reasons, we try to be really thoughtful about the resources of the state and say, no, in this situation, it's not strategically desirable for the state to own this parcel. And we might refer them to a conservation organization or suggest other strategies for them to achieve their goals in thinking about wanting to sell the land to us. But to be clear that we try to be really particular about what we pursue ownership of. That's a great question. Thank you for that. So at the point where I think a project is demonstrating the kind of qualities that would make sense for public ownership and that net public benefit, we begin putting together those project details. And what you saw in the package that was sent to you in preparation for this conversation today is, you know, maps, sometimes survey work, lots and lots of conversations with the landowner to make sure that we're getting it right. We may have appraisals involved, title review. So we do some of the due diligence leading up to the project to make sure that what we're presenting to you is viable, is feasible. We don't want to bring a project to you that has a strong likelihood of failure, or, you know, changing the details or the components of the project so significantly that we would have to bring it back to you again the following year. So we do quite a bit of work on the front end, and that's more of the reason why we try to only do this in situations where we see that there's a very clear and obvious benefit to the public, because we know that we have to invest a little bit of energy at the front end to make sure that we're bringing a package to you that is solid, is worth your time and energy, and is durable in the sense that if you have questions, hopefully I have answers. So let me just see. I think that's mostly what I wanted to provide, sort of what our process looks like. There are points in the process where we seek approval from our commissioner to continue to pursue a project, especially if it involves, you know, contracting for an appraisal or partnering with a conservation organization. And then we'll go through the process of informing the secretary and making sure that that they are supportive of the project. In the case of the two that I will be describing to you in a few minutes, because we're also acquiring land as part of this, we'll go through the full process that also involves getting municipal approval and governor's approval as well. So those details do complement this, these particular examples only because they're swaps. Yeah.
So what are we doing today?
Today, I'm going to take you to the southern part of the state. I think first, maybe we'll go to Jamaica State Park. So Jamaica, Vermont, has anybody been there, camped there?
Yes, well, it's in my district, and yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Lovely.
I don't know this parcel because it's on the other side of the river, but the west.
Have you been on the West River Trail before?
Yeah, I was actually on, well, there's two parts of the West River Trail, the south and a north, or lower and an upper, and I was actually on the board of the lower. So, but I don't know the upper, so I look forward to
Excellent,
hearing
excellent.
about that. I'm not a big fan of you.
In this case, this is a teeny tiny piece of land that has really, really big benefits to the public and to, from the perspective of our department. So the map might be a great place for y'all to follow along. There, yes, that is the map, exactly. There are two in your packet. This first one with that little yellow piece is the one I want to draw your attention to. So Jamaica State Park is the green highlighted, and I think you can see it well on your printed copy. The state park entrance is more, it's off the left-hand side of the page. So you'd be walking
So this
along
is-
the river. So this is the state park here, and then you walk along the river onto the yellow outlined parcel. We call those in-holdings. So whenever there's a private ownership surrounded by state land, we call that an in-holding. And that really elevates for us the importance of considering acquisition of a parcel that is internal, because what it creates is management headaches that could come along with conflicts in use. In the case of this parcel, the landowner has the right to drive their vehicle along that trail, that pedestrian trail. They could drive to that parcel anytime they wanted to. They, I believe, have the right to develop a camp. So they could develop a camp on that parcel, which would suggest that there would be more regular vehicular access. This has been a high priority project for us for quite some time. And up until recently, the landowner really wasn't interested in engaging, didn't see a lot of incentive to think about divesting of this parcel, because similarly probably recognized that there's some value in having this parcel right on the river, having a trail that runs through it. There's an archaeological site there. We hope having to host a picnic table there. It's a really nice picnic spot. So obviously something that we've been very interested in. The private landowner that owns this also owns 2 parcels that are outlined in blue on the bottom part of the page.
Yeah, well, here, right?
Yes, exactly.
And that's 27 acres?
That is 5.4.
Oh,
The yellow is 5.4.
The yellow one is 5.4 acres.
okay.
Who owns the purple, the one that's outlined in the purple?
Currently, Forest Parks and Recreation does.
Okay.
And
That's the one
then
that
Forest
they're
Parks and
gonna
Recreation owns all of
All
this
green.
as well?
Exactly.
So you own everything that's not outlined in the blue and in
And the yellow.
Okay.
Precisely.
Yep.
So the private landowner actually has a residence in the blue outlined parcel that's to the north.
Yeah.
And owns the parcel to the south and doesn't have legal access across right now. Right now, we issue what's called a special use permit for him to be able to travel between those parcels. And his interest is in owning the land so that those 2 parcels become contiguous. And this is what brought him to the table. He was interested in considering swapping or exchanging with us that 5.4 acre parcel that we've been eyeing for a couple of decades now. And in exchange for some configuration that would allow him to connect his land. And
So the
Oh, yes.
purple is the part that you, I'm sorry. Bob, I didn't
Yes.
see you raise your
That's
hand.
okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that at one point he had no interest in engaging, and now he does. So what's changed?
I think he is realizing the value of having contiguous ownership on that other side of the property and
I
knowing.
didn't know if he discovered gold or oil or something like that.
We looked for it before we agreed. So the purple outlined parcel is the 24.7, and that's approximate. The 24.7 acres that we would be proposing to exchange. So we take the 5.4 acres into our ownership, and we would convey out the 24.7 acres to this adjacent landowner. That would come with deed restrictions that would prevent houses from ever getting developed there, other residential structures, camps, that sort of thing. So in a lot of ways, we're really benefiting from several different angles from this transaction.
Deed restrictions on all the rest of the land he's purchased that you're swapping with him as far, or just a
Just
part?
the 24.7
Okay, so,
acres.
yep.
Mhm. And he already has a residence
I see
on
the
one of
res-
the parcels.
Okay.
And I'm not missing anything related to the other ownership, right?
And as far as, it's just a lot like the questions that we ask, a lot kind of like what Brian asked, is the piece that you're gonna propose to swap with him already has a road through there that he's had special permits to get through. So he's not gonna have restrictions to where he can't drive, at least drive a vehicle to that lower section piece.
My understanding is he currently has like a side-by-side type of vehicle that he uses. And that is the way that he's been. I think if you overlaid some of the old logging roads and old town highways, there are some pre-existing pathways that he's using, and he would continue to use. And by conveying this land, it would be his ownership. And we also retain through this conveyance, so we would be limiting his development and any future owner, their ability to develop this parcel, and we retain the right for the public to cross this,
Okay.
to access the
Yeah.
state park.
Hmm.
Let's see, where else did I want to take you as far as?
And the part, and the parcel that you're gonna, in the yellow, you like that one again because it's along the river, of course, and archaeological, site and just, and you just like that piece.
I think there's the conservation values that you just described. There are trails that cross the property and leave from that portion. You can see the red dashed lines. The one following the river is the West River Trail. And we have a right of way, so the landowner would never be able to prevent the public from being able to use that trail. But the one that springs off from that, I can't recall the name of that trail. But that one is one that the landowner currently could prevent us from using if he chose to limit our use. And like I said, we have picnic tables on the parcel right now. We could be in a situation where, from a management standpoint, I think this is where our state lands foresters chime in with the potential management challenges associated if this landowner or future landowner decided that they did want to exercise the right to develop a camp there and began driving to the site. That's a major conflict with recreational use that's currently happening that I guess you could attest to the popularity of. See, the West River Trail is a very popular trail for this.
Right, I don't know this part of it, but I know the south part, there's been a lot of issues with deeds and titles and even folks selling property and then still having an access to it just because of being adjacent to it. That's been a big problem.
Mhm.
So the only. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I just have a few comments, or questions, really. Are there other private properties along this area?
For our ownership that is in green, the in holding is that only that yellow piece. And then I don't know who the owner to the north is or on the other side of the river. I don't know if you know, Gannon. Do you want to introduce yourself, if that's
Yeah.
all right?
For the record, Gannon Osborne, Land Conservation Program Manager with the Vermont Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. There are private owners to the north on this trail, and then Jamaica State Park, there's another block of Jamaica State Park that begins again further down or upriver. And then also across the river is private owner, in private ownership. But this one in holding is the one private ownership within this area of the state park.
Okay, so, and the property goes, it looks like the boundary is in the river. Is it in the center line of the river?
That is the property boundary that our surveyor drew up based on the surveys and the town records. I'm not exactly sure what he used to draw that up and where the boundary lies, but that was based on all of the land records and the surveys that he could find, that was the boundary that he drew.
Okay. And has the town been involved so far, or is that something you do later?
Not yet, right?
Not yet. Usually, we like to make sure we have all the approvals first, and then we need that town approval as well. So we engage the town to get their support as well.
Right, there's been a lot of controversy, specifically the bridge, which I believe, I don't think I just got it up on my computer, I'm pretty
Right.
sure we're talking right here, right?
You're exactly right.
And so
The bridge is right
the
at the
bridge is over
entrance.
here.
Mhm. Precisely.
So is that solved? Are people happy with that?
We've been working with V-Trans to make sure that the repairs and related enhancements are done in a way that it guarantees that public access for the other landowners and to the state park, as well as making sure that it doesn't have any negative environmental impacts. So that's how we've been involved in the bridge project so far.
Has the temperature calmed down, do you know?
It doesn't seem like we've gotten anything recently. We've mostly been working with V-Trans on this, and our state lands forester is more sort of involved on the ground, and he didn't convey anything to us that suggested that this project would be an issue. I think he certainly expects that the land exchange will be supported by the community, but similarly, I've been working with him on the bridge project, and it didn't sound like he was hearing a lot from members of the public.
In your, if you were to retain, and it looks like it's gonna go that way, you're gonna not have vehicle access to that. Sure.
Right, we've acquired that right of way, and thereby the only
There's
time we would
stigma to
use
that.
it would be emergency access or for management purposes. Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's really one of the major benefits to this project. And I think that really is a perfect segue, although I know Senator Collmore, did you have questions? I'm sorry.
It's probably just the color. Is
Right.
this all wooded area?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Here's a, I want to see it.
it is really nice.
Oh,
This-
okay.
This is the area that we're talking about, and this is the entrance to the park.
I got it.
Okay. Okay.
See.
I guess the other question, so assuming the legislature gives you approval and everything, and then the town says, no, we don't want to do it, what happens then?
We don't run into that very often.
Okay.
And when we do, generally, we're able to isolate whatever that particular challenge is and work through it. And it's not unusual to have it take some time for us. So say, like you said, the General Assembly approves of us moving forward with this project. And we meet with the town, and the town says, well, before we really endorse this, we'd like to see a couple of different things happen. And we might take a little bit of time to help either meet the interests as they've described them, or find some kind of compromise that works for us. And it could take a little bit of time. Luckily, as long as it doesn't change the composition of the project, we're still able to move forward without.
Where does the
having-
town involvement come into it? I mean, I'm in real estate, so usually it's just a clean transaction. Here you go, you own this, I own that, we're gonna, so
Right.
where's the town come into this?
What we generally do is, we put the project together, we get a commitment from the private landowner that looks like a purchase and sales agreement. We get internal approvals through the commissioner and the secretary, and we're really at the point where the closing is scheduled. We expect this transaction to go through. We go to the community and we appear on their select board, have a conversation publicly about it. If it's a project that we expect there could be a lot of community interest in, we might actually do that a lot earlier. So it depends on the particular scenario. of
So
the
they don't have a
project.
stakeholder in it other than that you want it to go well with the community.
I think as a landowner in the community and, as an important partner in wanting to advance the community's goals, it's really in our best interest to make sure that the
Yeah.
community is supportive. But there is nothing in statute that technically says that we must have the approval of the
Okay.
town.
Fair enough.
There is,
Is there?
there's one in statute that says for the Agency of Natural Resources to acquire an interest in land, the secretary will offer to meet with the town and to discuss the acquisition with them. So we do have we do need to offer to meet with the town before acquiring an interest in land. And then as a general policy, we do that through meeting with their select board and presenting the project.
Sure. Just talking about it, just thinking about it, so maybe the town had first right of refusal or something like that. Maybe there was a deed restriction on there that
Right.
had said that, but.
Right.
That's what we ask questions.
Yeah, in this case, I would doubt that the town would have any issues and would be really glad for the state to take that property. There may be other things, a relationship that the town has with the property owner
Mm.
that might
Yeah.
pop up.
Well, in the town's case on this side right here, it looks like they're gonna take the 5.4 acres that they're collecting tax on, and they're not gonna collect tax on that anymore once you require it. But now they're gonna, this new owner is gonna pay tax on a larger parcel. So the town has a benefit as far as collecting more tax.
It's a good point.
Yes, true, if that property is more valuable.
Or just the land in itself, whether it's the same value per acre, you have just more acres to
Totally
collect tax
agree.
on.
Yeah, I just don't assume that it's more per acre, but.
I think the questions that you're asking and the dialogue is really, it's so consistent and in alignment with the kinds of things that we think about as we consider whether this is a project that is worthy to bring to you. And questions about the deed interests are a really good one that I want to walk through. And then also, sort of the perception could be that 5.4 acres and 24.7 acres aren't equal or a better gain for the public. And I think one of the things that we make sure we do when we prepare a project for your consideration is to be able to articulate sort of those intangible benefits that we just talked about, the benefit to the public to have this recreational asset remain in public ownership, as well as the management challenges that come with an inholding like this if that conflict were to flare up. So there are real strong benefits that would suggest that 5.4 acres is more valuable to us and to the public than the 24.7 acres.
As far as the site in itself, the historic nature of it, to where you think there might be something, archaeological,
Yeah.
is it Indian related or is it homestead related?
It is pre-contact.
Yeah.
Mhm. And we've had a number of, we've done a lot of work in Jamaica State Park that has required a lot of archaeological assessments, and they have all been pre-contact, and we have a lot of interpretive material there to help visitors understand that part of our history.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was gonna say, as they often say in real estate, location.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly.
And so you can make a pretty good case for 5 acres being.
Well, when you see where it's at and how it is, and you're interested with the trails and the water and all of that stuff, yeah, for sure.
We did commission an appraiser to do a preliminary valuation for us that arrived at a range of values that really helped support for us that we weren't giving away or proposing to give away something that's more valuable monetarily or, from the public's intangible benefit standpoint. So we feel really good about the justification here. The one piece of it that I think is also really important to factor into your consideration, because you brought it up too and are savvy enough to understand what it means to hold a right to an option to purchase or a right of first refusal. And we do own, there is a language in the deed that says that we have the right, the option to purchase that 5.acre parcel for $1. But that option may never come to pass. The current landowner could have the ability to continue to pass ownership of that parcel down in ways that would never allow us to realize that option to purchase for $1. Given how long it has taken us to have this particular landowner interested in coming to the table, we felt like a bird in the hand was better than 2 in the bush for us in this case.
Well, kudos for you guys to stay with something like that, because again, as Brian recognized, it is location, and it's it looks to be I think you got a good deal. So for what what you're willing to give up for what you're gaining. Do you want to go through any of this part of it, or what do you want to go through as far as, or what do you think that you want to go through now?
One last piece that I wanted to make sure and bring your attention to, it's referenced in the memo, but now that you have the map in front of you, it might help. As I mentioned, we go out and take a look at the parcels in question to make sure that that benefit is actually there and really fully present. And when we went out and had our survey staff go out, we found that the pond that you can see on the development lot, the one that he's developed, he's got a little pond there. So the parcel where his home is, surrounded in blue, that pond's retaining wall extends just a teensy tiny bit onto state land. And that is another situation where we might be bringing projects to you to figure out how to resolve an encroachment on state land. And again, to the benefit of the public, because we're not just going to correct any old oops and erode the boundaries of public land. In this case, because we were working on this land exchange, we discovered this small encroachment, and we're already considering conveying this parcel of land to that private landowner. We felt like, depending on how the project details come together, this is something that would both resolve that minor encroachment and allow us to achieve the public benefits that we've had our eye on for a couple of decades.
But in this case right here, it's gonna resolve itself because you're gonna swap the land anyway, so it's mute.
Exactly.
Did he
Exactly.
build that retention pond?
He did. Mhm.
Did he know he was encroaching?
I don't think that he did.
Okay.
He certainly says that he didn't, and sometimes you can tell when you walk a boundary whether or not someone actually should have known. And sometimes it's less clear, and in this case, some of the boundary evidence was less obvious and could have been more difficult to interpret. We'd love to have every adjacent landowner do a survey before they decide to build something close to the boundary. In this case, he didn't, but we're hopeful that going forward with this, we're able to address this.
Must be tough when you're in business, but if you sell like a half a mountain, how do you go with a boundary? You get the stake and all out?
You
or-
have to go and find them. I mean, I have been on some hikes. I
You
really have.
have to know,
I can
is
tell
it
you.
like a building block, so year to year?
It's- I can
Yeah.
tell you some stories too long here, but I've been on one of them where three of us were 2 days in the woods and I had my iPhone with a compass on it. We had one reference point here and we had the right bearing. And when it was all said and done, and on the other end, we knew there was a stake someplace. And on the accelerator, we went right through it and we flagged it. And as we were going, we found old markings. I mean, you never would have found them if you didn't have any bit of reference on them. This is 7-8 miles back in the woods. So yeah,
And indeed, you have to say where the boundaries, where the boundaries.
Well, you
are.
have to have-
Like a
well,
maple tree or
there's lots of
something.
times you-
Yeah.
There's lots of times you really don't have to say much. You can say, you know, acquiring the same lands as. But when you're gonna go on there and on this case right here where he put a pond in, these people were gonna cut some trees. And you wanna find out how expensive land is, cut some trees on somebody else's land. And it gets very, very expensive logging project
They
at that
can
point in time.
tap trees on somebody else's land sometimes.
Well,
if you don't own it.
it's sometimes.
When you're looking at a mountain that's 500 acres, for example, you gotta find boundaries of how you,
Uh-huh.
who's my property, who's their property.
Yeah, I can tell you as far as in the real estate business and seeing some really wild stuff. If I'm involved, we pretty much know what we're conveying or what we're trying to buy and that.
So you have
We-
to set boundaries, you have to set markers somewhere.
Well,
so
you don't have to, you just want to make sure that, again,
You own what you own.
yeah, you just want to make sure that before you can buy that land, that it's the land that you think it is and it's not your neighbor's land. And because people do kind of get a little protective about land. I mean, we've had some crazy stuff. We had two brothers that had two parcels of land that were right next to one another. And one of the brothers decided to sell his house. And so, yeah, we're all said and done. We've got it. They did the deed search and come to find out, and I mean, you can't make this up. The two brothers had these pieces of land and they were next to each other. The brother ended up building his house on his brother's land and his brother built on the other land. I mean, and so when you talk about, well, did they know? Well, obviously they didn't know, but once they found out, yeah, that was problematic. Oh, yeah, they resolved it all out. We chose not to be involved with it after that, but they did get it resolved out and each brother, you know, did whatever they did. I can't remember what they did, but yeah, that was a
I
shocker.
wondered about that.
Yeah.
Two people have to have a surveyor on each parcel just to get together, because one surveys.
You want everybody nodding their head in the right direction as you just want everybody right, and then you want to protect and document and protect, and
Mhm.
that's what you want to do. Land is a very, very, very personal thing to people, and it's just really amazing on how back to the beginning of time, some of the terms that they use and the rights that are there. And so, yeah, you want to make sure that you are conveying and understanding what you bought or what you sold.
You must have thousands of acres on one particular parcel, right, or hundreds of acres.
We're working on a conservation easement project right now that's about 3,000 acres.
Wow, so you have to know where all the boundaries are.
You do?
Wow.
We sort of collectively in the Forest Parks and Recreation Department think that our two licensed land surveyors have the best job in the department.
Yeah.
It brings them to beautiful
Okay.
places that
Yeah.
trails don't go.
It's amazing when you
it
get
is.
back there. It's
Well,
amazing. And there's 7 or 8 miles back in, I was talking about, when we did find that one line. You're finding old cellar holes, and I mean, you're convinced that no person has ever been on that land ever, other than the uncontacted people.
Mhm.
And then you stumble upon this cellar hole, and then, you know, the stone walls, and it's just, what were you doing back here? And it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, the whole state was deforested. It was
Yeah.
like 90% of our forest was gone about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, a
now
little bit
it's
better,
back.
yeah.
So it's pretty wild.
amazing how they can figure out the boundaries are in big parcels like that,
Yeah.
thousands of acres, you gotta figure.
If you want to do a field trip with the Forest Parks and Rec Department, you can go out with our surveyors.
I've done some field trips, and I don't need any extra ones.
It's good you have surveyors. They're hard to find
It is.
actually. By us, it's hard to find surveyors and it does mess up transactions. You can't.
It's a pretty
Transfer property.
astounding ratio. We have 2 licensed land surveyors and 2 survey technicians, so they're building towards getting licensed. And we have 360,000 acres.
My
And, you know, however many miles of boundary.
So
line.
they have to measure that.
They have a lot of-
How the distance is 0.8, 0.8.
They have a lot of work.
Yeah.
Measures.
Oh, they're starting, GPS now is playing a big part. I'm doing some lots that are subdivided right now, and, yeah, I mean, I actually was involved just to talk about it, not to talk about myself, but to help, you know, with what you asked. I'm doing a subdivision right now with the neighbors there, and they bought this parcel of land, and they put a septic system in, and they did all these improvements, and put a road in. And then we came some years later, and now we're subdividing these lands and building lots and all that. Come to find out that she didn't have the proper size land, and that her wastewater permit is somewhat suspect. And in fact, in real trouble. And she was giving us a real hard time about us doing subdivision stuff. And, you know, we did the right thing and said, hey, listen, well, we want to show you how good of people we are. And we're gonna actually give you some land so that you're in no longer violation of your wastewater permit. And so we did that, and hopefully from this point forward, everybody will smile and be good.
Drones now, they use drones to look at that.
You can. The best way to do it is just walk it. You got to get out there. You got to walk it. You got to, as your surveyors, you got to get out. You got to get on the land. You got to put your feet on it.
Right now, they're skiing it.
Yeah.
We got pictures yesterday, I think, of them on skis, setting up their tripods. And
Yeah.
And lasers, these are lasers.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
GPS things and stuff like that. So, sorry.
No,
So,
I'll take
yeah.
all the time to tell stories about being on
Well,
roads.
it's interesting to find out how they did it. I had
Isn't
no
it?
idea. It is interesting. Building lots are easy. You take a parcel, you set up building lots, before you take about 3,000 acres or something.
Well, what's really amazing is back when they really wanted the land developed, you know, they were selling 100-acre parcels. And then the requirements at that time, you guys probably know as much about this as I do, but they had to do certain things, and one of them was they had to put sheep woven wire up. And so a lot of these old parcels, you go back into, and again, you just would swear that nobody had ever been there ever, and you find old woven wire sheep fence, and it's been there for 120 years. You know, it's not a very proud fence now,
Yeah.
but you find remnants of it.
If you hit another town, you gotta be careful with the boundaries are from town to town too, right?
Yeah. You got town lines, you have stuff like that, town lines.
The towns together and that mountain each is.
Yeah, sure,
Mhm.
yeah, you do. Yeah,
Mhm.
you got-
The pond is so, spread out, which I think.
Lots of texture, as they say.
Yeah, it's something to learn. I never really think of that.
Senator Eagles, do you want us to go through?
What do you
the-
want, what do you want to do for best to do? If you don't need to go through it, then don't. Let's just go to the next one. If you're fine, and I'll ask the committee, do you want to go through it word line for line, or do you want to? Okay, do you want to go to the next committee? Do you want to go to the next purchase of land, or?
Sure.
Are you fine with that?
I'm absolutely fine. I know that Mr. Chernick did have some proposed edits to the language that we drafted. At some point, you probably want to walk through that, and I don't know if you want to do that now.
Senator Engel, for the record, Michael Chernick, Legislative Counsel. I would strongly recommend that you go through the language line by line based on experience. First of all, I want Rebecca to hear me go through it line by line. So I did make some editorial, not substantive, but some rearranging editorial changes to try to make it what I thought was clearer.
Yep.
And sometimes a member of the committee will catch me on something that should or
Then
shouldn't have
let's,
been a
then
particular
let's
way.
do that.
So I would assume that Rebecca would want to go through the Coolidge Forest exchange, and then I can go through the resolution.
Okay, sounds good. Tell us where you want us.
I think that works great. If you wouldn't mind looking at the next map, which is a little more dynamic, I will admit. We warmed up with the Jamaica State Park one. So we're in Woodstock now. And similarly, I think what's interesting about both of the projects that we're bringing forward this year, these are projects that we initiated internally because we saw opportunities both in benefiting the public from a conservation values standpoint, recreational access standpoint, but similarly wanting to address some management challenges that we were experiencing and that our neighbor was experiencing. And this just seemed like a symbiotic way to address the issue. So the principle of this exchange is really quite simple, but it required lots of colors and dash lines and things. So I'm going to take a few moments to try and orient you.
Thank you.
Yes, and again, why Gannon's here to help in the event that I slip up somewhere. So the green highlighted lands are the Coolidge State Forest lots. So that's Coolidge State Forest land. And you can immediately see it looks a little funny because the blue lots are the private landowner that we're proposing to engage in a land exchange with. So the green lot that is surrounded by the blue lots is landlocked. We can't get access to that unless we plead with our neighbors.
So the land that's in between the two, the green piece that's in between the two blue pieces is landlocked.
Yes,
So this piece right here is landlocked.
yes.
Okay.
And similarly, the blue piece that is surrounded by green blobs is landlocked as
Okay.
well. So the private landowner has an acreage that I can't recall off the top of my head that is landlocked. And then we similarly have an
160
acreage.
acres.
Thank you.
And who are the property owners that aren't identified?
The property owners on either side, I'm assuming, are other private landowners, not the same ownership. Okay, so other parties, other adjacent landowners that we're not engaged with, but would have to appeal to provide us with an opportunity to cross the land to access those.
So historically, if, I assume, when we first began to lay the land out for the Coolidge State Forest, you probably wanted that
Yes.
piece, but the owner said, no, I'm gonna hold on to it.
I think you're absolutely right that the opportunity to acquire that hasn't presented itself yet. And instead, what we're looking at is an opportunity to consolidate each of our ownerships and amend that access issue that we're both experiencing. So the middle column map shows what the swap is going to begin to look like. A portion of the green would become blue and a portion of the blue would become green. You can see the red hashed piece would be retained by the private landowner. And the yellow column is a trail easement that we would retain. So we would maintain access to the summit of what's called Old Baldy. There's an existing trail there, so this would make sure that the perpetual right for the public to hike that trail and take in those views comes, even though through this exchange we didn't end up acquiring that parcel. The landowner didn't want to give up ownership of that summit.
So this is the summit here?
The summit is somewhere in that yellow band. I don't see it. Gannon, do you happen to know where it is?
It's kind of hard to see without the topographic topography relief on there, but it is I'm trying to think how best to describe this. It is up towards the northwest end of that that yellow band. Essentially, that yellow band follows the ridge leading up to the summit of Old Baldy towards the northwest boundary there. And as Becca said, there's an existing trail there in place, and this corridor would enable us to maintain that trail or to properly site a trail there that would gain access to the summit.
And you don't have the summit now anyway. It's not that
Exactly.
you're losing the summit.
Exactly. So the third column of imagery, the final configuration, shows what would become private land and what would become the new configuration of Coolidge State Forest in this particular area. And the acreage that we would be exchanging is 102 acres. The landowner was really interested in seeing an equal number exchanged. And that's how sort of the somewhat arbitrary looking footprint of the exchange ended up coming about. And this does allow us to have legal access for both parties through our existing ownership versus the challenges that each of us experienced trying to gain access in the past. Sorry, Senator, I thought you had a question. One of the details that I think is, again, on the plus side of the public benefits associated with this, other than addressing the management challenges that come from not having legal access, is that the private land ownership currently has a conservation easement on it that's held by Vermont Land Trust.
Yeah.
And the land that we convey to that landowner will be subject to that conservation easement.
Yeah.
Vermont Land Trust has agreed to put to amend their conservation easement.
And then how does that work as far as, in this case right here, where you're gonna obviously have people traversing on the state's land, and will they have the right to traverse because of the conservation easement onto other land?
I haven't seen the conservation easement that Vermont Land Trust has, but I know, except for very rare circumstances, they always provide for public access.
Yeah.
So I would expect that that is something that they would have. It doesn't always include trail-based recreation protections, which is why that addition of the trail easement is so critical for us, because the conservation easement likely doesn't protect those trail-based values.
PLT's existing easement that they hold currently on the Ellertson parcel does not allow for public access.
Oh, not at all.
It's going back a ways. It was made in 2001. And so maintaining that trail corridor would open public access to that land. And then the easement to be conveyed to Vermont Land Trust on the land to be conveyed from the state to Ellertson has not been drafted yet, but it's imagined that it would look similar in nature to the existing easement held on the Ellertson land today.
Okay.
As far as the yellow portion of it, 400 feet, is there any significance to the 400 feet, or is that, why 400 feet? Because that's what you could get, or why is that?
Great question. Yeah, we went out there and we walked the property with our state lands forester and also our state lands recreation specialist in this region. And we there's an existing trail there, some of which it follows an old logging road along the ridge line, and it's fairly steep. And so we walked the contours and felt out, okay, this is what would be needed to site a reasonable recreational trail here. And so based on that path, we were recording our path on our phones. We looked at that and we're like, okay, that's about 400 feet wide.
Okay, to get to follow it, to go on the contours of the land, all that, so that you're not wandering off into somebody else's land.
Exactly. And then we presented that to the landowner. The landowner was agreeable to that number, and so that's what we done.
Those were all the pertinent details that we wanted to make sure to convey, both through the maps provided here and the description included in the memo. So we could answer any additional questions you have about this exchange, or I can yield the chair to Mr. Chernick to walk through the language.
Yeah, I'm good. Committee, any questions?
No,
I'm trying to find it again on just a bigger map of it. Is it by Killington? Is that?
It's in Woodstock. Let's see, it looks like, I'm just trying to see, Long Hill Road and Quinn Road might be the best ways for you to key in. Great, so I will give up the chair then.
It is east of Killington. You can see Killington from some of the higher elevations on the property if you're looking towards the west. Yep.
And there's also the issue of the extinguishment of the right to build the house.
Yes, I'm so sorry, I missed that, thank you.
So I was looking at that clause and wondering, are you going to mention it? So
Mhm,
what we probably want to mention it before.
That is another detail that's captured in the language that, in addition to making sure that the land that's conveyed to the private landowner, that private landowner has, in that conservation easement with Vermont Land Trust, has a reserved house lot, so they could build a residence, and that will be extinguished as part of this transaction.
Okay.
Oh, that's important.
It is. We're lucky that legislative council has a lot of experience with this.
So Baldy Way probably goes to Baldy.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, some of you, Senator, well, I guess I do know everyone right now, so Senator Ingles, I don't think we've met before, maybe we did in passing.
I think we have, maybe it was on Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, possibly,
Probably on Zoom, yeah.
possibly, yeah.
Pleasure to have you here, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Michael, for the record, my name is Michael Chernick. I am a legislative counselor and I draft resolutions primarily, and I drafted the land exchange resolution. I suspect it's close to 20 years now that I've been doing this. And everyone's unique. So let us go through this. You have the text, I believe, Linda distributed to everyone. And Rebecca, and you also have the text, so go through, because it's a little bit different. I made some editorial changes, and if you have problems or you members of the committee have a problem with something, stop me and we'll deal with it right away. So with all that being said, let's go through this. It's a joint resolution relating to state land transactions in Jamaica State Park and Coolidge State Forest. Whereas the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation, and I realize that comma shouldn't be after parks, because I know you don't have a comma after parks, and recreation, the department owns and manages the Jamaica State Park, the park in Jamaica, and the Coolidge State Forest, which includes the Curtis Hollow block in Woodstock, and I believe I need to put in the forest here. Check that. Whereas Jamaica State Park, which is situated adjacent to the West River, includes the widely used West River Trail, and a segment of this trail passes across a 5.4 acre inholding that Nancy J. Winslow Revocable Trust, the trust owns, and which is known as the Salmon Hole Lot, And whereas the public, and I should explain those parentheticals there, because I refer to the parentheticals later on. Whereas the public uses the Salmon Hole Lot, we could just say lot there, to access the West River and for cross-country skiing, hiking, and picnicking. And Peter Winslow has agreed to acquire this parcel from the trust.
Michael, if you go back to hiking, comma, I don't think you need that comma.
And I believe there's bicycling on that trail. There is at least at the other section of the trail, which is really important.
The segment of the trail passes across 5.8, which is mine is, we up in the first,
Right here.
which clause are you in?
Whereas the-
Jamaica State,
The public.
oh, here, yeah, and whereas the public uses the lot to access the West River Trail, the cross hiking, skiing, hiking and picnicking, we do, because we do use serial commas. Oh, we use serial commas in our office, other than I just mentioned a very specific detail that Rebecca would note, that in the name Forest, Parks and Recreation, the way it was put into statute was without that second comma after parks. But in our office, we use serial commas. It's been a matter of great discussion, and we made that decision a few years ago that we use serial commas. So,
Okay.
but thank you for noticing
No,
that.
it's fine, I don't like neither. Do you want to add bicycling? Is that appropriate? I mean,
I'll
I
leave
know
that to
that in the
Rebecca.
south part
I
of,
don't know for a fact, and I do know that other activities aren't included in this list, like snowshoeing, dog walking. So I would suggest that this is not an inclusive list and better to leave it, less specific than more specific. Bicycling, we handle a little differently than some other recreation. It's specifically designated by our commissioner. And I don't know off the top of my head.
And the activities that I had listed in the resolution are exactly what Rebecca provided for me. I did not go
Yeah.
off one word on that. I moved some commas around, but the specific activities are what Rebecca told me to include.
Yes.
And Peter Winslow has agreed to acquire this parcel from the trust. And whereas Peter Winslow owns the two non-contiguous parcels adjacent to the park, and the department recently discovered that one of the parcels encroaches on the park. And whereas the department proposes to convey to Peter Winslow an approximately 24.7 acre parcel that is of little ecological or recreational value that will resolve the encroachment in exchange for the department's acquisition of the lot and an associated right-of-way easement across the West River Trail to access the lot. And whereas the department will retain a right-of-way easement along Jacobs Road across the property to convey to Peter Winslow to provide access to this property for both public and forest management. And whereas Jamie Ellertson owns a 160-acre parcel that separates a segment of the Coolidge State Forest, the forest, from the contiguous, and so I will take out the forest there. From the I don't think we need to leave it since it's there previously. From the contiguous section of the forest, and he also owns a second parcel that the forest separates from his 160-acre parcel. And I believe Rebecca has explained that in some detail, the separation. Whereas the 168 Ellertson parcel and the separated segment of the forest are both landlocked and lacking in legal access, and the Vermont Land Trust, VLT, holds a conservation easement on the 168 parcel, and the easement allows for the subdivision and development of one residential lot, as I had just mentioned before I started. Whereas Jamie Ellertson has agreed to convey the department a 102-acre parcel and a 400-foot wide right-of-way easement for a public recreational trail to the summit of Old Baldy Mountain. And in exchange, the department will convey to Jamie Ellertson a 102-acre parcel. And these transactions will result in the extinguishment of the VLT easement, resolve the issues, access issues related to the 168 Ellertson parcel, including the house issue, and separate forest and the separated forest parcel, and provide permanent public recreational access to the summit of Old Baldy Mountain. And whereas 10 VSA, this is fairly boilerplate, and whereas 10 VSA 2606B authorizes the Commissioner of Forests, Parks, and again, that comma after parks should not be there, and Recreation, the Commissioner, to sell, convey, exchange, or lease, and we should have a comma after exchange, or lease, no, actually, we should not, because it's not, and that's a direct quote. So I will make sure the quote is, I'll make sure the comma's correct. Or interest in land, or to amend deeds, leases, and easement interests, subject to General Assembly approval. And both the Commissioner and the General Assembly find the following actions to be in the best interest of the state. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that the General Assembly authorizes the Commissioner of Forest, Park, and Recreation, that should be Parks, Forest, Parks, and Recreation, to take the following actions. First, with respect to Jamaica State Park, to convey to Peter Winslow a parcel of approximately 24.7 acres in the town of Jamaica with certain deed restrictions prohibiting commercial and residential development and use and limiting use of the parcel to forestry, recreation, and vehicular access by Peter Winslow. In exchange for the conveyance of the department, Peter Winslow will convey to the department without restrictions a parcel of approximately 5.4 acres known as the, I'm going to say there is the lot, if everybody's agreeable to that. It's the lot and an associated right-of-way easement along the West River Trail to provide access to the lot. The department shall retain a right-of-way easement for forest management and public recreation purposes across the 24.7 acre parcel from or along the legal trail 12 to access the park. And as I confirmed, which is why I didn't put trail in parentheses, with Rebecca a few moments ago, legal trail 12 and the West River Trail are not one and the same. We're talking about two different trails. Second, with respect to Coolidge State Forest, to convey to Jamie Ellerson a 102 acre parcel, which is part of the Curtis Hollow block, subject to the conveyance to the Vermont Land Trust of a conservation easement restricting development and use of the parcel to forestry, educational, recreational, and open space purposes. In exchange for the conveyance of the 102 acre parcel to Jamie Ellerson, he shall convey to the department a 102 acre parcel adjacent to the forest, along with a 400-foot wide right-of-way easement for a public recreation trail to the summit of Old Bald Mountain. James Ellerson shall convey an extinguishment on his 168 acre parcel of the existing right to subdivide and develop one residential lot. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of State be directed to send a copy of this resolution to the Commissioner of Forests, Parks, where there should not be a comma, and recreation. And before this is final, I will go over again with the editors all the comments.
So we'll wait to vote on it until we get back what you have edited and to go on. And so, if that's okay with
Oh,
everyone.
absolutely, yeah, and that's your choice, Senator, completely, but I do.
Unless, I mean, I know that we were gonna do that earlier, in another committee, and that's what they had advised us to do, but if you think it's fine to vote.
I would actually like to make these changes. For example, I'm going to put the forest at the first time Coolidge State Forest appears, remove it in the subsequent location, change one, the first Coolidge State Forest to the forest, and that's further on. One instance where I'm changing the Salmon Hollow to just the lot, because we've already, a couple of instances of that, where I have several instances of that where we've already mentioned the forest. There were several comma issues to be corrected.
So, yeah, I think we'll wait for that to come back. I don't see any problems as far as, I think I'm reading my committee correctly, that there's not. Do I have a question?
What did you, you finish your sentence.
I really don't think that we have any problems as far as what's been proposed here, as far as to move forward with it, so.
Just a couple changes, everything.
Yeah, I have insertions, a couple of places, a few commas that need to be corrected up, and S removed or added to parks.
Chair Ingles, if it's okay too, there are a couple of places where references to the conservation easement could be clarified just slightly, and maybe working with Mr. Chernick on the next version would be great.
Yeah, I was hoping for that, yeah.
Some suggestions.
Okay, so if you get,
Well, the bicycle stuff is a big deal, because the lower trail is heavily used by bikes. And so I just think that's important, and I'd like some time to figure that out, maybe talk to staff.
I can just get an answer of whether bicycling is
Well, I
currently.
have some other questions too, like about the easement across the West River Trail to provide public access, because I thought the state was going to own the property like fee simple, but maybe not. And if not, then I just want to understand the easement, because that's been a huge issue in the other part of this trail. But I can do that offline with staff.
that is in your area, and I want you to be
Yeah, and I
completely comfortable with that. You're gonna have to explain it to the people when you go back home, so absolutely, Senator.
I appreciate that.
And in terms of adding the bicycling on, I'm going to turn to staff from FPR for direction on that.
I just don't happen to know off the top of my head, and it's not something that's just automatic. So it feels like it would be smart for us to go back and make sure of that. And then if the committee has the pleasure, we might be able to answer your question about the easement right now, if that's helpful.
I think I'll talk to you anyway about the bicycle, so I just want to understand
Yeah, we want,
why the easement is necessary.
we want your name on the land.
I don't want my name on it. I
Well,
just want
don't you
people
want a
to-
plaque on there,
this-
Senator Harrison State Park?
This.
Harrison State Park, or, what do you think, Senator Renner? Like, don't she,
This,
shouldn't she have her name on that park?
Jamaica
She
State
just
Park
sent me
is
that.
great.
Yes, you should.
Yeah, that's what it was,
First, because you wanted to clarify the easement with me, it would seem to make more sense for you to have the conversation with Senator Harrison.
Yes.
The two of you clarify
Yes.
any easement issues,
Mhm.
and then you can come to me and we can accordingly, any changes that I need to make to the easement language, that would be the moment to do it after Senator Harrison's issues are clarified.
Yeah.
And by which point you'll probably have the bicycle issue clarified as well.
And providing that everything works out the way that I think it probably might, we'll vote this out tomorrow. If everybody's, would everybody be okay with that? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, I just need to reach some folks. so.
yeah, absolutely.
Do my best.
Well, just make sure you're ready. We don't have to be
Well, I
tomorrow.
want to make sure the folks who are in charge of the trail are,
You do
that
what-
all of their
You do with what you want to
Real
do.
estate.
concerns.
Well, I gotta get my fee on.
He's gonna go walk. He's gonna walk
We
first,
can't afford
okay?
that, I know that.
Well,
Can I get a copy of the?
Well, so, Senator Harrison will.
Oh, do you mean
we're gonna
what I
go your
just
direction as
Yeah.
far as when you're-
Well,
If
no,
I
no,
wanted
I'll
an
tell you
extra,
what.
I'm happy to put it
No,
here.
well, what I just said is, so if you'd like to have a photocopy of this, we could certainly do that right now.
I have a paper copy that I could do that with. I was just thinking if we had an electronic version that we
There's an
could.
electronic version of, do you have you don't have an electronic version of mine before I made these changes? I'm happy. I don't think so. Linda, could you send
Yes.
Rebecca an electronic version of
It's
what?
also, yeah, it's also on the webpage.
Oh, I could just grab it from there. Then. Don't worry about it. That's perfect.
Okay, but it does not reflect it doesn't reflect the pen marks that I just made.
Great.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Anything else for us? Okay, Senator Renner, you got any questions? All good? Okay. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much.
Good to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Yeah,
Great.
I'll check from the inside.
Please.
Mr. Turner.
Yeah.
You gotta throw some land in for Essex Junction too.
Now she got it there, now she got it.
Thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Safe
You as well.
travels.
Committee, before we go offline, anything else that anybody wants to discuss? No? Ready, we'll go off.
Okay.